morning and welcome to Our Issues Milwaukee. I'm your host, Andrea Williams. Our focus this morning is on the juvenile justice system. Lincoln Hills School for Boys and Copper Lake School for Girls have been under criminal investigation for about 4 years over allegations of child neglect and prisoner abuse. Lawmakers in 2018 passed a bill that would replace the prison with smaller facilities around the state to keep young offenders closer to home, with some run by counties and some run by the state. Recently, Wisconsin Governor Tony Evers announced that construction will soon begin on 2 new juvenile detention centers. And here to fill us in on that and more is Democratic Representative David Crowley, who represents Assembly District 17. How are you?
I'm doing well. Thank you for having me.
Welcome back to Our Issues.
Well, this is always a good program to be on.
Well, thank you. And as the introduction just pretty much spelled out, there's quite a bit going on surrounding the 2 juvenile detention centers, Lincoln Hills and Copper Lake, which are located north of Wausau.
Right.
So these legislators passed a bill last year that requires the State Department of Corrections to close these youth prisons by 2021. So if you would bring us up to date on where we are with this.
Absolutely. So we had a juvenile corrections study committee come together to look at different sites for the type 1s. That's the ones that are going to be built here in Milwaukee County and Outagamie County that we know for sure. But now we are going to a second phase, which is the Juvenile Corrections Grant Committee, which gives counties the opportunity to actually put in a letter of interest which was due by March 31st, to say that they're interested in building their own CRC, Secured Residential Center for Children and Young People. And so right now, we are waiting for more of those applications to come in. We do have a legislative fix in the works to make sure we can push the timeline a little bit to give counties the ability to apply. But right now, I think that we are full force in making sure that we can reduce the amount of young people at Lincoln Hills and Copper Lake and really bringing these young people back home so we can actually give them the rehabilitation they deserve and need. Yeah,
and you are on this grant committee.
Yes.
So if you would kind of paint the picture of exactly what your hopes are with this particular committee.
Absolutely. Well, first and foremost, I want to shout out to the governor for appointing me on this committee. But right now, it's really about coming up with a statewide plan. When we think about these regional facilities and making sure that we can rehabilitate these young people, more importantly than anything, we want to make sure that we're not adding any more beds than we currently have or need. And so it's making sure that we operate at a capacity that we know is we're currently operating at, and making sure that we're not taking these young people down the road that they don't need to be in, which is basically incarceration. So at this point, we are going to do our due diligence in making sure we come up with that statewide plan and keeping as many young people as close to home as possible.
That is the goal. So I mentioned a number of lawsuits have been filed. The state agreed to pay nearly $19 million to a former Copper Lake inmate who was severely brain damaged in a suicide attempt. And then another case forced the state to dramatically scale back on its use of pepper spray and solitary confinement. So I think the question for many people is, how did these conditions get so bad and go under the radar for so long?
Well, we knew about these issues for a very long time. I think Racine County was one of the first counties to say that we're not sending any of these young people to Lincoln Hills. And at the end of the day, we could only blame the past administration, former Governor Scott Walker. He had mismanaged the whole quite frankly, the whole Department of Corrections when we think about our prison population, but specifically Copper Lake and Lincoln Hills. He did nothing. He never visited these young people to see what they were going through.
Wow.
And so when those lawsuits was filed, it actually gave many of us a glimpse of what was happening in there. One of the reasons why I believe we were able to pass Act 185.
Okay, and so he did sign Act 185 into law in 2018, which mandates that these facilities be closed by 2021. So does that timeline of 2021 still exist, or where are we on that?
Well, at this point, we're still operating under that timeline. There has been a bill that was introduced by Representative Strauss, Senator Taylor, Representative Goyke, and Representative Bowen, and pushing it out about 3 months on the front end and on the back end. At the end of the day, we want to make sure that this is a clean transition, because we don't want to traumatize these young people anymore by moving them from place to place. So it's extremely important that we look at this and do our due diligence, but we also understand that we don't want these kids at Lincoln Hills. So it's really putting the pressure on not only the state but the counties as well to do everything that we can to take care of these young people.
And when you look at the numbers, there is a large percentage of young people at these facilities that are from Milwaukee County.
Absolutely.
So it's announced that these 2 facilities will be built. One's in Outagamie County and the other in Milwaukee County on Milwaukee's north side.
Yes.
So do we know how these facilities will be paid for?
Well, joint finance are going to come together and figure it out. We did have a situation where the building commission was supposed to pass and make recommendations on the amount of money we're going to put towards these facilities. Unfortunately, they did not pass it. So we will see what happens throughout the joint finance process in the next few months. I believe that we're going to get there. It's just going to take a little bit of time. When we think about making sure that we can draw down the amount of young people at Lincoln Hills and closing it is really a bipartisan effort. So I'm glad that everybody is on board and doing something for these young people.
That is important. So this current facility where these young people are being housed is more than 3 hours away.
Yes.
So talk about the importance, and you have mentioned how important it is to have them closer to home, but what will that mean for not only those young people but for their family members as well?
I mean, at the end of the day, there are so many different studies out there that says that if you want to really rehabilitate these young people, we have to bring them closer to home. And bringing them closer to home gives them access to more resources in the community that they can have access to when they are released from these centers. But more importantly, they're closer to their family. I mean, so many people who are in this position cannot afford to drive up to Lincoln Hills, which is 3.5, 4 hours away. They can't pay for the gas. They don't even have a car. There's so many other issues and barriers. And so we understand, I think everybody understands, whether you're on the far left or on the far right, that we need to bring these children home so we can just take care of them at the end of the day.
Yeah, so I was reading these new facilities. The hope is that they are more home-like and less prison-like, because really I think that if they're in surroundings that feel a certain way, then you're going to act a certain way.
Absolutely.
So it's kind of like the psychology that's going to go into even creating the environment that they're going to be in.
At the end, when these facilities are built, we have to look at the best practices, right? And so one of the things that we do understand is that we don't want to have a huge amount of beds at these facilities. I don't think that there will be no more than 40, 45 beds in a facility, but making sure that we rehabilitate them. So classroom sizes, I think more so looking like not just a big facility or a big prison for these young people, because we don't want to traumatize them any further. And so it's extremely important that we give them the environment that they can thrive in when you talk about education, but also more importantly, learning a skill. So by the time they are released from these centers and they are a particular age, they can actually put those skills to use.
Yeah, and I think it's important to remember that they are still kids.
Absolutely.
And they are going to have a second chance at going through all that they're already experiencing at a young age. And so it's important not to just write them off and say, well, they did the crime, so let them deal with whatever the situation may be. But really, the goal is to provide them with programs and services while they are in these facilities.
Absolutely.
And giving them the tools to do better because they know better.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that is what's most important in my opinion. So the Milwaukee County Correctional Facility is planned at the intersection of Teutonia and Mill Road. It's going to be run by the State Department of Corrections and the Department of Administration. So this is what gets tricky because this facility has been announced, and then there was a meeting with residents who live in that area, and there's a percentage of residents who are not fans of this facility being in their neighborhood. So talk about that and how you're going to be able to approach, some people not being happy with this selection.
I mean, I think that when we have this conversation, many people believe that we need to bring these young people here. But the question is where do they go?
Yeah.
Do we put them in other neighborhoods that are distressed? Do we put them in some of the best neighborhoods in Milwaukee County? Which is, I think, is the right conversation to have, because we need to figure out where these young people are going to go so we can rehabilitate them. And so it's extremely important that, one, we do our due diligence in making sure that we are informing the community throughout throughout the whole process. It's one of the things that we're going to do with the Juvenile Correction Grant Committee. But it's also imperative that we help people understand why this is needed. I think that a lot of people look at these young people as just criminals, right? And at the end of the day, they're not criminals. They have not. They've basically made some bad decisions to land them there, but that doesn't mean that this defines them. And so it's extremely important that we have that real community dialogue on what we need to do with these young people. Because at the end of the day, you know, we are all responsible. We may not live on the same block, but we live in the same community, and it's more important that we lift each other up right now.
Absolutely. And so there's also a secured residential center that's planned for Milwaukee County, and that's going to be run by the county and house non-serious juvenile offenders when Lincoln Hills and Copper Lake close. So the county is preparing to hold a series of community engagement meetings to share those plans and really get some input as opposed to just kind of saying, okay, here's what we have, and everybody just have to go with that. So the community will have an opportunity to voice their thoughts and opinions.
Absolutely.
On that.
I mean, the counties, you know, just so people understand, the counties are going to be picking these facilities. And so if you have any questions or any issues, it's important to contact your supervisor and your county executive. But it's also important that instead of just saying no, that you're a part of the process on finding the best location to house these young people, because we need them to rehabilitate and come back into society and be productive citizens.
Absolutely. So we hope also to see the hiring process be a little different, being more selective in hiring, meaning that you're looking for more of a youth development type of individual as opposed to a corrections position. So one of your current committees in serving in the state assembly is on criminal justice and public safety. So as we wrap up, I want you to, you know, give us your thoughts on what you hope to accomplish when it comes to this particular subject in general. We've talked about, you know, the young people that are in the juvenile justice system, but in general, what are your hopes?
Well, my hope is that we can reduce the prison population. Last week, we actually passed an expungement bill out of our committee, and I'm really hoping that we can get that on the floor so we can give people their lives back. Too many people who are living with felonies for the rest of their lives and can't become productive because of the scar that society puts on them because of whatever they did in the past. So I'm really hopeful that we can get an expungement bill by the end of this session. But at the end of the day, the biggest goal that we all should have is how do we reduce the amount of money that we're spending on our prison population? How do we keep not only our young people, but some of our adults back in this city so they can become productive citizens? And sometimes we all understand that incarceration isn't necessarily the way to go. When we think about, you know, people's lives, you know, the barriers to employment, the barriers to housing, yes, they have an excuse on why they committed these crimes, and they shouldn't commit these crimes, but we need to step up in making sure that we can eliminate all of these barriers so people don't live a life of crime.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for stopping by, and you know you're welcome to come back anytime to keep us up to date.
Well, I appreciate that.
All right, always a pleasure. Representative David Crowley, he represents the 17th District in the State Assembly, and to keep up to date with the State Assembly, you can go to their website at legis.wisconsin.gov. When we return to Our Issues Milwaukee, we'll talk to a former gang member turned community organizer who spends his time helping at-risk youth stay off the streets. We'll meet Mr. Jose Vasquez right after this.